Hello, fellow learners. I'm Michelle with BookPal, and I am here today with Allison Shapira for our July AuthorConnect Chat. Allison is the author of Speak with Impact, and she's a former opera singer turned an entrepreneur. So she's a founder and CEO of the Global Public Speaking Company, which is a firm that helps people with confidence and authenticity in their meetings, pitches, and presentations. For the past 15 years, she's worked with global brands as a highly rated keynote speaker, trainer, and executive communication coach. She and her team have worked with companies ranging from Bank of America to Belvedere Vodka. She also teaches public speaking at Harvard Kennedy School and travels around the world with a nonprofit called Vital Voices. That is, helps women leaders move up in their careers and grow their businesses. Today, Allison will be sharing a little bit about how she came about writing the book, Speak with Impact, and as well as share 3 key strategies for transforming how you communicate every day. Of course, feel free to submit your questions at any time during the presentation. We will have a chat Q&A at the end. And if you have to jump off early, as always, we are recording this webinar. So I will go ahead and let you take it over from here, Allison.
Great. Thank you very much, Michelle, and hello, everyone. I'll tell you a little bit about my journey to writing the book. I'll share 3 techniques from the book that you can use every day, and then I would be glad to take your questions. And I'm demonstrating good public speaking skills by looking directly into the camera. So hopefully during this session, you'll also learn about public speaking on camera in addition to speaking in any other setting, in person or otherwise. By background, I'm an opera singer by training, and any of you who have read the book or have seen me in person will know that that's a big part of who I am and how I came to the field of public speaking. When I left opera, I found out that everything I learned as a singer made me a very good speaker and an even better coach, because as a singer, I knew how to use breathing to calm my nerves and project my voice. I knew how to use eye contact to connect with my audience. And I had stage presence. I simply had to convert it to executive presence. So I started to coach people and lead trainings and developed my own methodology based on opera and then bringing in adult learning techniques, and moved to DC to launch this company full-time and hired a team of trainers and coaches. So now we partner with very large organizations, global nonprofits, and government offices all around the world. I give musical keynote speeches, and then my team and I will lead executive communication programs in-house at companies everywhere, which is a really fun part of our work. We have a special focus on helping emerging leaders and top talent with their communication skills. So as you move into positions of leadership, how do your communication skills need to change? What do you need to learn and adapt in order to effectively exercise leadership internally to your organization or externally? And that's why I wrote the book, because I firmly believe that public speaking is a skill and not a talent. It's not something that you have to be born with. It's something every single one of us can improve with practice and feedback. And as I was working with clients and looking for books to recommend to them, also to teach in my class at Harvard University, there was no book that was both comprehensive and a quick read on how to write, practice, and deliver a speech. So I decided to write one myself based on my experience and the methodology that I've developed with my team. So Speak with Impact is a practical guide to the busy professional moving up in their career who wants to use their voice to have an impact at work or in their community. One of my clients in a Fortune 50 bank gave me the best compliment when he said, this book should be required reading in every leadership development program in the country. And that's the goal in this book, to create a manual that anyone can use to read, use, and then feel more comfortable and confident speaking up. I'll tell you 3 reasons why this book is different from other books. The first is that it's practical. I define public speaking as any time you speak with one person or more with some goal. So public speaking happens when you're speaking up in a meeting, leading a conference call, walking into a new meeting with a new client or prospect, pitching to a group of investors, or giving a formal speech in front of a large audience at a conference. So this book will help you in all of those situations, in your day-to-day speaking situations and your once-in-a-lifetime unique opportunities. The second differentiator is that this book is easy to use. It's intended to be used immediately with whatever you have coming up. We tell people in our workshops that if you have to step out of the workshop to take a call, you'll be more effective on that call because of what you've learned so far in the workshop. And this book is no different. As you read the book and go through the book, you can immediately tease out exercises and takeaways that you can apply that very moment with whatever you have to do that day, no matter whom you're speaking to. And then the third differentiator is that the book is purpose-driven. It's not about how to take the company talking points, throw them on a slide, and read from the slide. It's asking you to look inward to determine why you're called to speak. Why do you care about your subject? Why do you care about your audience? Why do you care about the work that you do? What gives you a sense of purpose? Because when you connect with that sense of purpose, then the work you do, the way you speak is so much more personal and authentic. And that's what helps you find your voice. And through building your skills, you can find your courage to speak. So let me share 3 challenges that most people face that I've noticed in our workshops and coaching sessions. And then I'll give you 3 techniques for how to address those 3 challenges. The first question that people will ask is, how do I overcome my fear of public speaking? The fear of public speaking is universal. It exists in every country in the world with both men and women, all genders, and no matter what stage you're at in your career. So it's important to recognize that nervousness is normal. You always want a certain baseline nervousness before you present because it means you care. It means you're paying attention. And if you're not nervous before an important pitch or meeting, you may not be taking it seriously enough. What I recommend is when people feel very nervous and fearful about public speaking is that they reframe those nerves as excitement. And nervousness and excitement are both caused by adrenaline. It all depends on how you look at it. So by changing your mindset from nervous to excited, you can actually give yourself positive energy that you can use in your speech, meeting, or presentation. And I'll give you an example. We were leading a 2-day workshop for a group of 7 people. And that was a very intense program, 2 days, 7 people. There was one woman who was very nervous. And every time she had to get up and speak, she would say, "That's amazing." And I'd say, "Okay, it's your turn to speak." And she'd say, "That's amazing." And what she meant was, "I'm terrified." But she was reframing it as excitement, and that energy gave her a boost in the presentation. And that phrase, "That's amazing," actually became a mantra for everyone else in the workshop, so that whenever they were nervous and had to get up and speak, they would take a deep breath and say, "That's amazing," and they'd speak. So that's one example of how you can reframe your nerves as excitement and actually harness your nervousness for good to give a more powerful, more energetic speech or presentation. The second question our clients will ask is around the content. How do I explain technical, complex concepts in clear, jargon-free language? Especially people coming from technical backgrounds. And as they move up in their career, they have to start speaking to people without the same level of technical expertise. And that's where we come down to the question, why you? And this is something I alluded to earlier when I talked about how our focus is purpose-driven in the book. Anytime you're preparing a pitch or a presentation, or even preparing to walk into a meeting or networking event, I always ask people to ask themselves, why you? Why do you care? Why do you care about your speech? Why do you care about your audience? Why do you care about the work you do? Because when you answer that question, you answer it not with jargon, not with talking points, but with your own personal motivation. And I'll give you an example. I was working with a mid-level manager within a bank going through one of our training programs. And I kept asking her as she prepared a pitch for clients, why you? And she said, well, because I like service. I said, okay, but why? She said, because serving others is important for me. I said, why? And she said, well, I grew up in a family business, and every day I woke up and saw my parents put their clients' needs before themselves every single day. And that inspired me so much that that's what I want to do when I work with my clients. And we realized the why you was such a powerful way of explaining what she does. She didn't need to talk about the capabilities and the technical aspects. She needed to talk first and foremost about why she cared. And then she could get into more of the details. But she connected with people on a personal level. And we inspire people through personal language, not through jargon or through talking points. And then the third question that I get asked by my clients, one of our most frequently asked questions is, how do I slow down when I'm speaking? Because so often when we get nervous, especially if we're speaking virtually, we tend to rush through our words. Or as we move up and speak to more senior level audiences or bigger audiences, we start to rush. And there's a very specific technique that helps you slow down, calm yourself down, and speak in a more confident professional pace. And the technique is speaking to one person at a time. So instead of looking at 50 people and trying to connect with everyone all at once, or even 10 very important people, scanning the room distracts you and distracts them and makes you rush. But if you choose one person in the audience and look at them for a full thought, then you turn to someone else and you speak to them for a full thought. And then you choose someone else and speak to them for a full thought. What you're doing is connecting with one person at a time. And we're all better, more comfortable, more authentic speaking one-on-one. So I don't want you to try to speak to 50 people at once. I want you to have a series of one-on-one conversations with as many people in the room as you can. And I'll share a success story of that in action. One of our clients was racing every time she had a conversation with her prospect, and she couldn't get them to commit to doing business with her organization. And then in the very next meeting after our session where we worked on speaking to one person at a time, slowing down, she was able to implement those skills in the next meeting with the client. He was able to ask follow-up questions, so to make it more of a dialogue than a pitch. And that was the meeting in which she got the business. And that was because she could slow down, which gave her time to breathe and him time to jump in with questions, which made it a more fruitful conversation. So those are 3 techniques that you can use anytime you speak to have more of an impact, no matter who you're speaking to, no matter how many people you're speaking to. In a couple of minutes, I will open it up to your questions. But before that, I want to mention that if you'd like to get a free chapter of this book and read it, get to know it before you buy it, visit speakwithimpactbook.com, and you'll be able to sign up, download a free chapter, and then enjoy the book. You'll also receive public speaking tips from me, which are a collection of questions that we're asked frequently from our clients in our training programs, keynotes, or coaching sessions. We take those frequently asked questions and we turn them into a newsletter, and we give you the solutions to those questions. So visit speakwithimpactbook.com in order to get a free chapter of the book. We're also available to help you in any of your meetings, pitches, or presentations. And I would love to take your questions about anything that I've covered or a whole host of other public speaking topics that I may not have covered yet. I would love to take your questions.
All right, well, that was great, Allison. Thank you so much. I personally am really happy that you are our author today, because public speaking is something that everybody deals with as a challenge, and I certainly suffer from that myself, and I'm still getting used to doing the AuthorConnect chats on camera. So if I do get a little bit nervous or slip up, I will start thinking about, all the things that I've been reading in your book and all of the key points. I was rigorously taking down notes through that entire conversation, or that entire message. So just to start off, when when was that moment where you made the connection that being an opera singer had the same translating qualities as being a executive speaking coach?
Or it was the moment. It was the moment I got my first job outside of the field of opera. I was working in diplomacy as a speechwriter and found out that I'd be on the speakers bureau as soon as I joined that organization. And I had never spoken before. I knew nothing about it. And I started to go to Toastmasters meetings and started to learn about public speaking. And the more I learned, the more similarities I saw from speaking from opera to speaking. So it was that first job where I was thrown into public speaking with no background, and I had to adapt. I was grasping at straws, and the straws that I found came from my musical background, and that's how I was able to make that transition. And then it's been a lifelong process of continuously calling on what I've learned and then using those old skills in a new way. And I'm still doing that again and again.
Yeah, it actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Would you say that the nerves that you get from going on stage to sing opera versus going on stage to give a speech are different, or do you find it to be kind of the same feeling?
They're the same types of nerves, but when I sing opera, I feel like I have a different level of control than when I speak in public. So the more you speak and the more you sing, the more comfortable and confident you get, the more you feel like you can control the process. And in opera, my own personal comfort level was never enough that I felt like I was really in control when I was on stage. Who knew if I could control my breathing or if I would hit that high note at the perfect time with the perfect pronunciation? And in fact, one of the differences that I tell people between opera and public speaking is that with opera, there's an expectation of perfection, which leads to a much higher level of nervousness because perfection is so difficult to achieve, if not impossible. Whereas in public speaking, the expectation is not perfection, it's authenticity. You certainly need to be prepared and know what you're talking about, but the audience will forgive you if you make a few mistakes. They're not going to write it up in a negative review in the newspaper the next day. So with public speaking, the nervousness can be different. And with practice, the nerves, you can reduce the nerves, not completely eliminate them, but you can reduce them and feel more comfortable and then use them productively.
Yeah, that makes that translation of there's a little bit less pressure to be perfect does give you a little bit more ease. I can only imagine what it's like to have to hit the exact note at the exact time singing opera. So I think that the topic of nerves is such a big component of public speaking. They say that, people are more afraid of public speaking than dying. It's a common statistic that people say. And when it comes to nerves, what I'm curious about is, do you think that it is something that we are born with to be nervous about public speaking, or something that's a learned behavior over time?
I've thought about that question a lot, and I did a fair bit of research on it as I wrote the book. I wanted to understand where this fear came from, because I saw it as universal. As I mentioned, I could be sitting on a plane next to someone from Rwanda or Argentina or Japan, and they're all asking the same thing. How do I calm my nerves? So it is universal. And in my research, I found a number of different theories. Nobody knows 100% for sure, but the theory that I talk about in my book is that we survived as a species, not because we were the biggest or the fastest animal, but because we bonded together. We banded together in groups. And it was as a community that we survived and thrived. And so back then, being ostracized from the community meant death, alone in the elements by yourself, unable to protect yourself. And I believe that that fear of ostracism has stayed with us from such a deep perspective because it's how we evolved. And so now what people are usually afraid of, it's not forgetting what they were going to say or saying the wrong thing. Ultimately, what most people all around the world are afraid of is making a fool of themselves in front of their peers, whether it's the community, their bosses, their colleagues, their clients. And so we have that deep-seated fear of rejection because it used to mean death. And that's why so many people fear public speaking.
Yeah, the reason why that question comes to my mind is when I was reading your book, I kept thinking back to when I was in grade school. I went to a private grade school, and one of the things that they loved to do was make us give speeches and presentations in public. And from the beginning, when we were in kindergarten, every year, multiple times. And I'll never forget, I hate to have to say this, I won't say his name, a boy in my class who would cry every time he got up on stage. Before he even could open his mouth, even in front of a classroom, he would start to cry. And I think that that made me more scared about public speaking because I felt more pressure seeing him and like empathetic to see him being nervous. And so I always kind of, as a child, had a little bit of a bigger fear, I think, of public speaking, even though I had been doing it the whole time. And I think that kids, it's really interesting that kids are initially scared of that because they haven't experienced what adults have. They say that, we get more scared of things as we get older. So I really liked, obviously, for people who are completely new to public speaking or are looking at public speaking from a different angle of it's not just about getting on a stage and giving a speech. It's also about interacting in a business context. What would be the number one thing for them to start focusing on first and foremost when they go about writing their speech?
Writing their speech, I always ask people to use 3 questions. The third one we mentioned, I'll go through that again. But before you write a speech or presentation or even prepare to go into a meeting and speak up when you're not on the agenda, I ask people to ask 3 questions. The first question is, who is your audience? Who are you speaking to? So that you understand what language they speak. And I don't mean what foreign language, although that may be the case. I mean, do they speak the language of your industry? Do they understand the jargon, the acronyms? How do they feel about you, your organization, or your subject? So a deep, thorough audience analysis is the first thing that you do in order to put yourself in the mindset of your audience and then choose language. The second question I ask is, what's your goal? Every speech or question that you ask in a conference has the opportunity to influence people's behavior, to change the way they think, to change the way they act. That is an incredible opportunity. And if you've ever sat through a boring presentation wondering to yourself, where is this going and how is this relevant to me? That's when the speaker doesn't stop to ask, what's your goal? What do you want people to do as a result of hearing you speak? And that can help you use a more clear structure. Start with the conclusion. So when you're speaking to a very busy decision maker, you know to get to the point right away and then unpack the details as necessary. It all depends on who your audience is. And then the third question, which we talked about earlier, is why you? Why do you care? Because that builds your confidence from the inside out and reminds you that your right to speak doesn't depend on external validators like where you went to school or what your title is. It comes from your caring, why you care about what you're doing. And that gives you the confidence to then walk into the room and hold your own when people are interrupting you or not letting you get in on a conversation. So those are the 3 questions I ask people to ask before they write a speech or presentation. Then they can actually write the material because they're in the right mindset.
Yeah, that reminded me of a quote that you wrote in chapter 1. I think I have it here. Is that with the goal component, that giving a speech is not just to impart information, it's to empower people to work together to solve a challenge. I think that that's such a unique way to position the intent behind public speaking and a way for people to focus more on why they're giving the speech versus the fact that they have to give one in the first place.
Exactly.
So I also was curious about, you mentioned that breathing is a great way to help with nerves. Are there any other quick tips that you think that you can use to help to relax and find peace before you give a presentation?
Building on that concept of breathing, I call it pause and breathe. And pause and breathe is something you can do to center yourself before you go into a room. It's what you can do in the moment when somebody asks you a question you don't know the answer to, or you have less time to present than you thought. And pause and breathe is what you can do instead of letting out all those tiny little filler words like you know, kind of. So pause and breathe is one of the most transformational tools that we teach our clients and that I write about in the book. Other tips that you can do before you go into a room, and I have actually a video on our website about how to calm your nerves, 5 tips to calm your nerves as you go into a speech or presentation. Breathing is a big part of it. Asking yourself why you, reminding yourself of that why you is a great way to center yourself. I do that before every workshop or speech I give. I go into a quiet room, take a few deep breaths, remind myself why I care about this, why I do what I do. And then I remind myself of the first sentence and the last sentence, and then I smile. And the act of smiling makes me feel better and reminds me that I've got this. I'm going to do a great job.
Things that I really enjoyed about reading your book was that you think of everything, every little thing that's going to come up when it comes to writing the speech, preparing to give the speech, giving the speech itself, and all of the different factors that you may run into that people would convince themselves out of doing something. And you have a section that's like, this is what happens if you have technical difficulties during your presentation. Mm-hmm. This is what happens if you are running late, and et cetera. You should be, I don't know, all the different factors that can affect you in giving a speech. And so I thought that was, I like a good book that does that, where it's not just saying, here's how to be a good speaker, but also here are all the things that you're going to run into.
Absolutely. That is based on many, many years of experience and mistakes.
Mm-hmm. So we have a question from one of our attendees, which is, how do you warm up your voice? And actually, I was going to ask you, what is your pre-speech ritual? So I believe that has something to do with it, right?
Yes. So warming up my voice, there's a way I warm up my voice when I sing. I won't go into that. But what I'll do is do some light lip trills with a vocalization. So a lip trill, anyone who has kids might call these raspberries. And I'll vocalize that. Right? And the longer you can hold that, the more constant your breath support is. And we teach breath support in the book. But then vocalize it. So now you can go. I won't make you try that.
I think I need to figure out how to do it.
So being able to vocalize a trill. And then start with an M word. Good morning. Good morning, and try and think about the sound coming out of your cheekbones instead of coming from your throat like this. Those are a few of the vocal warm-ups that I will do, and I'll try to remember, I will focus on speaking on the breath, exhaling and speaking at the same time. Now, these are fairly advanced concepts. I talk about them in the book. I also have a video about them on my website, which is globalpublicspeaking.com. You can see a link to how to breathe using these methods. And then you'll also see that 5-step process for calming your nerves beforehand. But you're so right to ask that question, because the person who asked the question was so right to ask it, because our voice is an instrument. And when we speak, people are so affected by the quality of our voice. We can hear how someone feels about themselves in their voice. We can hear how they feel about us in their voice. We can feel whether they're sick or not. We can hear that many times in their voice. So to be conscious of your voice and purposeful and intentional about it before you speak, especially over the phone, is critical.
Yeah, I like that you brought up over the phone, because that's a component that we think about, for example, when we're having conversations with our clients, is that there is a nonverbal component to being on the phone, and it is your tonality and how you are speaking and the sound of your voice, not just the words that you are saying. And that is such a huge part about public speaking, and something I hadn't thought about until I read it. And I'm really glad that you did that demonstration, because I don't know how to do that. Okay. But I'll learn.
I can help you with that.
So I have another question that came in. It's tips for phone interviews. So that actually goes along with what we're talking about.
Yes. There are 2 things that I recommend when you're speaking over the phone, and a phone interview is critical because that's going to make the decision between whether you get the in-person interview or not. Two critical techniques that I recommend, or tips for speaking over the phone. First is to stand up. So I'm standing right now. I actually have a really nice Veridesk standing desk, which I love. And so that's at a high level because I know over a webinar or over the phone that when I stand and move around, I have more energy. Think about when you're seated on the phone, how you're normally sitting, you're probably slumped over. And so your voice gets scratchy. So standing up lets me move around on the phone. I'm using my hands, and that comes across in my voice. The second thing I do over the phone is I smile. I put a big smile on my face, and then I answer the phone, and I'll say, "This is Allison." And I'll speak with a smile. Now, over the phone, it doesn't sound like a big, goofy grin. The difference is it sounds warm, confident, and enthusiastic. And that's how you want to sound in a job interview or an important client call over the phone. So stand up and smile are two critical transformational tips. They're so simple, but they have a huge impact on how you're perceived by the person or people on the other end of the phone.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's as simple as that. Stand and smile. Anybody can do that. So
Exactly.
another question that we got was, what can you do to strengthen the projection of your voice? So that we did talk a little bit about monotone and a little bit, but they also asked about eliminating sounding monotone and then projecting more.
Those are two very complementary topics. The first, how to project your voice, comes back to the breathing that I mentioned. So there's a 3-step process that I teach in the book and that I have as a video on my website. And it involves, first of all, getting into the right posture for speaking, learning how to breathe in as opposed to this superficial breathing that we do with our upper body, using your abdomen, your diaphragm to take in a deep breath. And then as you exhale, speaking on the breath. So you're technically exhaling and speaking at the same time, which for some reason makes people feel like you either do one or the other, but you have to do both. And that's something that you can practice over time. And I have exercises in the book for doing that. Speaking on the breath is what helps you project your voice. Now, speaking with vocal variety, avoiding monotone, comes down to a technique called intention, speaking with intention. And intention is about committing to whatever it is you're saying. Think about, the idea is you can try introducing yourself with no intention at all. Good morning, my name is Allison Shapira. Versus introducing yourself with 100% focused energy, intention. And then you say, good morning, my name is Allison Shapira. And it makes your vocal variety so much stronger, so much warmer, and so much more powerful.
I was going to actually ask you, in addition to that, do you believe that if you sound confident, if you speak confidently, that will make you feel more confident?
I believe confidence comes from a variety of different places. When you identify why you care, that builds your confidence. So there's an inside-out component. There's also an external component. When others validate your work, it builds confidence. When you have positive reinforcement from a speech, it builds confidence. Certainly, speaking with confidence means also being confident in the skills that you have and the level that you're at. It's not about pretending that you're somewhere else or pretending that you're somewhere you're not. For me, confidence comes from owning who you are and where you are without making apology for it. And that, in my experience, is the most powerful expression of confidence because it's the most pure form.
Yeah, and in the book you write about, in the same section on confidence, something about a core value statement and how that can help you to be more confident when giving a presentation. Do you mind sharing what your core value statement is?
I have a few different ways in which I approach that, but the idea is that before I speak, I remind myself that I want to be the voice that one person needs to hear today. I truly believe that each one of us has something powerful to say on behalf of ourselves or others. And so today I'm going to be the voice somebody needs to find the encouragement to speak up. And I know that it will happen because people come up to me and my team after our programs and they literally say, "You were the voice I needed to hear. I so needed this today. You have no idea how much I needed to hear this." And that reminds me why I do this, why these skills are not just communication skills, they're life skills, they're empowerment skills. They make us more impactful in our work, certainly, but also in the way we show up every single day. And that has a positive ripple effect on everyone. So reminding myself of that is part of my core value statement.
Can I steal that?
You may quote it.
I'll quote it. So I realized that I don't want to end this conversation yet without talking about visuals. So obviously PowerPoint comes to mind, and a lot of people use PowerPoint in their presentations and different other visuals as well. What are the do's and don'ts when it comes to visuals?
Personally, I use slides and other visuals as little as possible. And I do it for a few reasons. First, because communication is around connecting on a personal level with an audience. And the more technology you introduce into that, the more you diminish that personal connection. The second is more practical. I have a limited amount of time to prepare, and I would rather spend my time on my message than on text boxes and backgrounds and fonts and double checking consistency. So given the limited amount of time, and given that my goal is to connect with others, I don't want to use slides. You'll notice I don't use slides for this because I want it to be about me connecting with the group, with the people watching. Now, many times you do need to use slides, although ask yourself, do I need to use slides? Not just because that's what I've always done, but what value, what additional value do slides add that I can't add on my own? If the answer is none, you've saved yourself some time. But if you do need slides, I'm a big proponent of less is more. On one slide, I may have one phrase, one statistic, one visual. It means I'm going to have a lot more slides. So I can't say use as few slides as possible. You may use a lot of slides, but each slide has one message, one key point. Because if you try to cram everything onto a slide, your audience can read faster than they can listen. And so they're not even going to listen to you. And then they're going to tune out because everything they need is on the slide. So they build a relationship with the slide instead of you. So less is more. Don't have full sentences on the slides, and remember that the audience is your audience. So don't turn and face the slides with your back to the audience. Connect with the people in the room.
That brings me to another question, because I think that at least I'm guilty of this, is when you are using slides for a presentation, people tend to add a lot of text and information on it because they are afraid that they'll forget to speak on these topics. So, which is that's how I feel. And I agree with you. When I see a busy slide, it completely distracts me from the conversation and the speech that's being given. So when it comes to memorizing your speech or remembering what you're going to talk about, what do you recommend?
I recommend not trying to memorize your speech or presentation. The only time I ever spoke without notes was when I did a TEDx talk, and that's part of the TED philosophy is you're not supposed to use notes. So that was the only time in my life that I went up without notes. I'll always have an outline with me. In fact, you may notice if my eyes go slightly down and then up, I'm looking at the notes that I have pulled up on my screen in very large font with lots of white space. And I'll do that in front of a group. I'll bring my notes on stage with me in large font, white space, single-sided, printed out. Now, for a lot of the keynotes that I give, obviously, I know what I'm going to say. I don't need it, but I have it there just in case. And knowing that it's there calms my nerves and removes the what if Scenario, what if I forget what I'm going to say? Well, I simply pause and breathe, nod, walk over to where my notes are, look at the audience and say, let's move on to my next point. And I keep going, and that's fine. So people feel like they have to memorize everything, but when they memorize it, they take out the interactivity, and then they're simply reciting a script. And it also causes way too much pressure, because of course you're going to forget something because you're nervous about forgetting something. So have the notes, and even if you don't look at them, they're there, and you can relax and focus on the audience.
That's a little bit comforting, I think, is if we don't have to memorize, it's okay. So I think that about wraps up our time. I know we could probably talk for an hour and I could have a million questions, but I just really wanted to thank you, Allison, for joining us today. And I really enjoyed reading your book. I think that there is a lot of valuable content that anybody can pull from. I want to reread it and do some of the exercises that are mentioned and really try to execute on all of the different tips and recommendations that you include. So if anybody is interested in buying Speak with Impact for their organization, you can visit book-pal.com/speakwithimpact, and you can get the free chapter that Allison mentioned on speakwithimpactbook.com. If you're interested, if you'd also like to, you can reach out to me directly at michelle@book-pal.com. If you're interested in having Allison come to your organization, etc., we'd love to help you make that happen. And stay tuned for our next author chat. Thank you so much, Allison.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you, Michelle. I enjoyed it, and great questions, everyone. I really appreciate them.
Thank you. All right, bye, everybody.